In a quiet Maine town buried under winter snow, a former Navy SEAL was trying to disappear into an ordinary life. But one morning, a young German shepherd stood outside his rescue station and refused to leave. The dog wasn't hungry, wasn't lost, and wasn't looking for comfort. He kept staring toward the eastern road, then back at Ethan, as if begging him to understand. What Ethan didn't know was that someone was trapped in the cold, and the dog had chosen him for a reason. This is a story of loyalty, survival, and the kind of healing that can arrive on 4 trembling paws. If it touches your heart, tell me where you're watching from. And please, like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and keep these stories coming. Winter had a way of making everything look honest. The frozen lake outside Moosehead seemed endless beneath the pale morning sky. Snow rested on rooftops, pine branches, and abandoned docks, as if the entire town had agreed to move more slowly until spring returned. Ethan Mercer stood outside the community rescue station, a steaming mug of coffee warming his hands. At 35, he was still young enough to be called a veteran and old enough to feel tired of hearing the word. The wind tugged at the edge of his navy soft-shell jacket. He barely noticed. For a long moment, he watched sunlight spill across the ice. Quiet, still, predictable. Things he had come to appreciate. A year and a half earlier, his life had looked very different. Noise, orders, deadlines, deployment schedules. The constant expectation that someone, somewhere, was about to make a mistake that could cost lives. 12 years as a Navy SEAL had trained him to stay alert even when exhausted. It had also left him with a problem he never talked about. He no longer knew what to do when nothing was wrong. Moosehead had become his answer. Not a perfect answer, just a quieter one. Instead of military operations, he now trained volunteer rescue teams for winter emergencies, snowmobile accidents, missing hikers, ice rescues. Useful work, work that helped people, work that didn't require him to carry a rifle. Most days, that was enough. Most days. The station door opened behind him. "You're here early again." Ethan turned. Ben Holloway stepped outside, carrying a clipboard tucked beneath one arm. Ben was the kind of man people trusted immediately. Broad-shouldered, practical, and impossible to impress. At 42, he had spent most of his adult life coordinating rescue operations across northern Maine. His bright red rescue jacket stood out sharply against the white snow. "You ever sleep?" Ben asked. "Sometimes." Terrible answer. Ethan smirked. Ben shook his head and glanced toward the lake. "Weather report says another storm might roll in tomorrow. Looks like it. You planning to scare another group of volunteers with your ice rescue drills?" "They'll thank me later." "They never do." The conversation ended naturally. Neither man minded silence. That was one reason they worked well together. Ben headed back inside. Ethan remained where he was. The town was beginning to wake. A plow moved slowly down the street. A bakery opened across the road. Smoke rose from chimneys. Normal life. He had spent years protecting it, without ever really participating in it. That thought lingered longer than he wanted. Instinctively, his hand slipped into the pocket of his jacket. His fingers found cool metal. The old brass compass. The edges were worn smooth from years of use. Commander Warren Hale had given it to him after a training exercise nearly a decade earlier. "A good compass doesn't tell you where to go," Hale had said. "It reminds you when you're drifting." Ethan closed his fingers around it. He rarely talked about Hale anymore, rarely talked about any of it. Some memories felt heavier with time instead of lighter. A sudden movement near the edge of the parking lot pulled him back to the present. Something small stood near a snowbank, watching him. At first, Ethan assumed it belonged to someone nearby. Then he looked closer. A young German shepherd. Not a tiny puppy anymore, but not fully grown either. Its black and gold coat was dusted with snow. One ear stood upright, the other folded slightly at the tip. The dog wasn't barking, wasn't wagging, wasn't approaching, just watching. Ethan frowned. The animal looked familiar, not personally familiar. The kind of familiar that comes from seeing the same face in passing several times. Then he remembered. The rescue center, the veterinary outreach events. A young shepherd that occasionally appeared with one of the wildlife volunteers. The dog took a cautious step forward, then stopped. Ethan crouched slightly. "Hey there." The dog's ears twitched. No movement, no fear, no excitement. Just attention. As if it had been searching for someone and had finally found them. That feeling should have been ridiculous. Instead, it made the back of Ethan's neck tighten. Years of training had left him sensitive to details he couldn't always explain. The dog's chest rose rapidly. Its fur was damp. Snow clung to its legs. It looked tired, very tired, yet somehow determined. "You lost?" The shepherd tilted its head. Still no bark, still no retreat. The wind blew harder across the parking lot. For a moment, neither moved. Then something strange happened. The dog lowered its head and slowly walked closer. Not toward Ethan's hand, not toward the coffee, toward his boots. It stopped within arm's reach and sat down. The movement felt deliberate, almost formal. Ethan blinked. Well, that's new. The dog stared up at him, amber eyes. Bright, focused. Older than they should have been. He noticed a faded red collar around its neck. Part of the fabric had been repaired by hand with white stitching. Someone cared about this dog. Recently. The realization eased some concern. This wasn't a stray, at least not originally. The shepherd glanced toward the road, then back at Ethan, then toward the road again. A small movement, easy to miss, but not meaningless. Ethan had spent too much of his life reading body language to ignore it. The dog seemed restless. Not frightened, not hungry. Restless. Waiting. For what, he couldn't tell. The station door opened again. Ben stepped outside carrying a radio. His eyes immediately landed on the shepherd. "Friend of yours?" "No." "Looks like he disagrees." Ethan looked down. The dog had quietly moved closer and was now sitting directly beside his leg. Ben laughed. "Congratulations, you've been adopted." The joke should have felt light. Instead, Ethan found himself staring at the animal. The dog leaned slightly against his boot. Just enough pressure to be noticeable, not enough to demand attention. Trust, or maybe hope. Something about it unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Because for the first time in months, maybe longer, he felt something shift inside him. Not excitement, not concern. Recognition. The strange feeling that something important had just arrived quietly into his life. And neither of them understood why. Snow continued falling lightly across Moosehead. The lake remained frozen. The town remained peaceful. Yet as Ethan looked down at the young shepherd sitting beside him, he couldn't shake the feeling that the calm around them wouldn't last much longer. By mid-morning, the quiet rhythm of Moosehead had changed. The rescue station, which had felt almost sleepy at dawn, now hummed with activity. Radios crackled, snowmobiles were checked. Volunteers carried equipment in and out of storage bays, while weather reports played softly from a mounted television in the corner. Ethan Mercer stood beside a wall map, reviewing routes for the afternoon training session. The young German shepherd was still there, not wandering, not exploring, waiting. The dog had settled near the entrance, curled on a rubber mat where melting snow formed small puddles around him. Every few minutes, he lifted his head to check Ethan's location before resting again. It should have been amusing. Instead, Ethan found it oddly unsettling, almost as if the dog considered keeping track of him an important responsibility. "You know he's still watching you, right?" Ben Holloway approached, carrying 2 folders. Ethan didn't look up. "I noticed. You planning to name him?" "I don't even know who owns him." Ben glanced toward the shepherd. "Looks like he already owns you." Ethan shook his head. The joke wasn't new. Several volunteers had already made similar comments. The strange thing was that nobody had seen the dog arrive. One moment, he simply wasn't there. The next, he was sitting outside the station, staring directly at Ethan. The thought lingered longer than it should have. A radio suddenly burst to life. "Dispatch to Moosehead Rescue. Possible vehicle incident reported near North Ridge Access Road." The room immediately shifted into work mode. Conversations stopped. Chairs moved. Maps unfolded. Ben grabbed the radio first. "This is Holloway. What do we have?" The dispatcher responded through static. "A driver reported seeing an SUV partially off the road near mile marker 12. Occupants unknown." Ben exchanged a glance with Ethan. "Could be nothing. Could be someone freezing inside a disabled vehicle." Ben nodded. Exactly. Winter in northern Maine had a way of turning minor mistakes into emergencies. Within minutes, volunteers began preparing equipment. Ben started assigning teams. Ethan helped load thermal blankets and medical kits into a rescue truck. The work felt familiar, comfortably familiar. Problems, objectives, solutions. Unlike emotions, emergencies usually made sense. As Ethan secured a storage compartment, movement near his boots caught his attention. The shepherd had gotten up. His posture had changed completely, no longer relaxed, no longer patient. The dog's ears were rigid. His amber eyes remained fixed on Ethan. Then something unexpected happened. The shepherd walked toward the truck, stopped, turned, looked toward the eastern side of town, looked back at Ethan, then repeated the movement. Once, twice, 3 times, as if trying to communicate something. Ethan frowned. Dogs were smart, but this felt deliberate. Too deliberate. "What's got into you?" The shepherd paced in a small circle, not anxious, urgent. A subtle but important difference. Ben noticed it too. "Maybe he hears the sirens." "There aren't any sirens." The dog moved again, toward the eastern road, back toward Ethan, toward the road again. A volunteer named Grace laughed softly. "Looks like he wants to take you somewhere." Grace Turner was one of the newer rescue volunteers, a former schoolteacher with a practical attitude and a habit of noticing things other people missed. Normally, Ethan would have brushed off the comment. Today he couldn't, because something about the dog's behavior felt wrong. Not random, wrong. The shepherd suddenly sat down. For a moment, Ethan thought he had finally calmed. Instead, the dog lowered his head and released a quiet whine. The sound wasn't loud, yet it cut through the busy station more effectively than a shout. Ethan froze. The noise carried something he couldn't easily explain. Not fear, not hunger. Frustration. Like someone trying desperately to speak a language nobody understood. His hand drifted unconsciously toward the brass compass inside his pocket. The worn metal felt cold, steady, grounding. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. Years ago, during a training exercise, Commander Hale had once told him, "When every piece of information says one thing, but your instincts say another, don't ignore either. Figure out why they're disagreeing." Ethan hadn't thought about that advice in months, maybe years. Yet, standing there, watching the shepherd, he heard it clearly. The radio interrupted his thoughts. Dispatch again. The reported SUV had already been located. Empty. No injuries, no emergency. Just a vehicle that had slid into a snowbank overnight. The tension inside the station immediately eased. Ben exhaled. Well, that's good news. Most people returned to their work. The shepherd didn't. If anything, he seemed even more agitated. Ethan watched him carefully. The dog walked toward the eastern road once more, then stopped, waiting, watching, expecting. The feeling returned, that strange sense that something important sat just beyond reach. Not danger, not yet, but a decision, a choice, one he hadn't fully recognized. Ben stepped beside him. You okay? Ethan kept his eyes on the dog. Do you know where he came from? No. Anybody report a missing shepherd? Not that I've heard. Ben studied the animal for a moment, then shrugged. Probably belongs to someone near town. Maybe, but Ethan wasn't convinced because the dog didn't look lost. Lost animals searched for safety. This one looked like he was searching for someone. Outside, snow began falling again. Thin flakes drifted across the frozen streets. The shepherd stood near the edge of the parking lot, silent, waiting. For reasons Ethan couldn't explain, he found himself unable to look away. And for the first time since the dog had appeared that morning, a thought entered his mind. What if this wasn't a coincidence? The dog turned toward the eastern road once more, then looked directly at him, as though waiting for an answer. Ethan did not follow the young shepherd because it made sense. He followed because ignoring him had begun to feel like the more dangerous choice. The eastern road out of Moosehead was narrow and quiet, lined with pines that bent beneath the weight of fresh snow. Ethan drove slowly in the rescue truck, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the radio. The German shepherd sat in the passenger seat, tense and upright, his damp paws pressed against the floor mat. Every time Ethan slowed at an intersection, the dog leaned forward, nose almost touching the windshield, guiding him with small, urgent movements of his head. Easy, Ethan murmured. I'm watching. The dog did not relax. Past the last row of houses, the road dipped toward the frozen lake. The town sounds faded behind them until all Ethan could hear was the heater blowing, the tires crunching over packed snow, and the shepherd's uneven breathing. He had not told Ben he was leaving yet, not officially. That bothered him. Procedure mattered. In rescue work, freelancing got people hurt. But the false alarm at Northridge had left a gap in the morning, and this road was close enough that Ethan could justify a quick check before reporting back. At least, that was what he told himself. The dog suddenly barked once, sharp, low. Ethan eased off the gas. Ahead, a narrow service lane curved toward a wooded section near the lake. A faded wooden sign leaned beside the entrance, half buried in snow. Moosehead Bird Observation Point, closed for winter. Ethan stared at the sign. The dog struck the passenger window with one paw. All right, Ethan said quietly. I hear you. He parked where the service lane became too deep for tires and stepped out into the cold. The shepherd jumped down before Ethan could stop him, landing awkwardly but recovering fast. His left ear folded at the tip as wind pushed through his coat. Snow clung to the faded red collar around his neck, the white hand stitching now wet and dark. Ethan grabbed his pack, a thermal blanket, a rope line, and a compact pry bar from the rear compartment. Then he radioed in. "Holloway, this is Mercer. I'm checking the old observation point east of town. Possible animal-related welfare concern. I'll update in 5. Ben's reply came almost immediately. Animal-related? Mercer, what does that mean? Ethan looked at the shepherd, who had already reached the tree line and was staring back at him. It means I'll explain when I know. He clipped the radio to his jacket before Ben could argue. The walk to the observation point should have taken 3 minutes. It took nearly 10. The snow was deeper beneath the trees, and the trail had disappeared under wind-blown drifts. The shepherd pushed ahead, then circled back whenever Ethan slowed. He was young, not yet fully coordinated, his long legs sometimes sinking too far into the snow, but he kept moving with a kind of desperate focus that made Ethan's jaw tighten. Halfway down the trail, Ethan saw the first sign that the dog had not imagined anything. A pair of glove prints in the snow. Not old, not clean either. Someone had fallen there, pushed up with both hands, and kept going. Ethan crouched and touched the edge of one print. The snow crystals had not fully hardened. Recent. He looked ahead. The shepherd had stopped near a low branch. Something dark hung from it. A strip of red fabric. For a moment, Ethan thought it belonged to the dog's collar. Then he saw the difference. This fabric was torn clean through, like part of a leash or strap had snapped under force. The shepherd stepped close to it, lowered his head, and made a sound Ethan had not heard from him before. Not a bark, not a whine. A broken, trembling breath. That sound changed the entire morning. This was no longer a strange dog leading him on a strange walk. Someone had been here. Someone might still be here. Ethan unclipped the radio again. "Ben, I have signs of a possible injured person near the east observation point. Starting a sweep now. Send 1 support unit." There was a pause. Then Ben's voice changed. "Copy. Stay on comms." Ethan moved faster. The trees opened onto a small clearing at the edge of the lake. The old bird observation tower stood there, built from weathered wood, its narrow platform raised above the snow. In summer, tourists came here to watch loons and eagles. In winter, the place looked abandoned by the world. At first glance, nothing moved. Then Ethan saw the railing. Broken. A section of the wooden platform had collapsed inward, leaving jagged boards tilted beneath a crust of snow. A stainless steel thermos lay on its side near the base of the stairs. Beside it was a field bag, partly open, with medical tape, animal feed packets, and a folded rescue net spilling into the snow. The shepherd bolted past Ethan and scrambled toward the damaged platform. "Hey, wait!" The dog ignored him. He shoved his muzzle between 2 broken boards and barked, frantic now, paws scraping at the wood. Ethan dropped to one knee beside him. That was when he heard it. A voice. Faint. So faint the wind almost took it. "Rook." The dog froze. Then his whole body began to shake. Ethan leaned down, pressing his cheek close to the gap between the boards. "Ma'am? Can you hear me?" A painful breath answered him. "Please." Ethan cleared snow and splintered wood with gloved hands until he could see beneath the platform. A woman lay trapped in the collapsed space below, one leg pinned beneath a heavy support beam. Her chestnut hair was tangled with frost. Her face was pale, except for a scattering of freckles across her nose. She wore a forest green technical jacket, torn at one sleeve, and one bare hand was curled against her chest, as if she had tried to conserve warmth. Her eyes opened halfway. Green, unfocused, but alive. "I'm Ethan Mercer," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "I'm with Moosehead Rescue. I'm going to get you out." Her gaze shifted past him to the dog. "Ruck," she whispered again. The shepherd pressed himself flat to the boards, whining so hard his body trembled. Ethan understood then. The dog had not come to the station because he was lost. He had left because she made him. The woman swallowed with difficulty. "Lena," she managed. "My name is Lena." "Okay, Lena, stay with me." "I work with wildlife rehab. I came to check traps after the storm. The platform gave out." Her breath hitched. "I couldn't move. I sent him." Ethan looked at the young shepherd who was still trying to squeeze through the broken opening to reach her. "You did good, Rook," Ethan said softly. The dog's amber eyes flicked toward him for the first time since they arrived. Not relieved, not yet, only pleading. Ethan pulled the thermal blanket from his pack and slid it carefully through the gap toward Lena's shoulders. Her lips were turning blue. Her speech was slowing. That worried him more than the trapped leg. Cold could be quieter than blood, and far less forgiving. He keyed the radio. "Ben, I have one adult female alive, trapped under a collapsed wooden structure at the east observation point. Possible lower leg fracture and hypothermia. I need medical extraction and a structural kit. Mark it urgent." Ben answered instantly. "On our way. Do not move the beam alone." Ethan looked at Lena, then at Rook, then at the cracked boards shifting beneath the weight of snow. "I'll stabilize first," he said. But he knew the truth. The clock had already started. Ethan had learned long ago that panic wasted oxygen. So he did not panic. He made the space smaller in his mind. Not the lake, not the storm, not the broken tower. Only Lena. Only the beam. Only the seconds he could still use. He slid the thermal blanket farther beneath her shoulders, careful not to shift the pinned leg. Lena flinched, but did not cry out. That told him more than a scream would have. Either she had discipline, or the cold was dulling her body faster than pain could reach her. "You're doing well," Ethan said. Lena gave a faint, humorless breath. "That's what people say when things are bad." It can be both. Her eyes moved toward him, unfocused but stubborn. "Are you always this calm?" "No." "When aren't you?" Ethan checked the angle of the collapsed beam instead of answering. Rook lay flat beside the broken boards, his nose pushed as close to Lena as the gap allowed. His red collar was wet with melted snow, the white stitching bright against the dark fabric. Every time Lena's breathing slowed, he made a small sound in his throat. Not loud enough to distract Ethan, but enough to remind her she was not alone. "Talk to me, Lena," Ethan said. "What hurts most?" "My ankle. Maybe my knee. Hard to tell." She swallowed. "Left side. I can feel my toes, but not much." "Good. Keep wiggling them if you can." "I know." The answer came too quickly. Ethan glanced at her. Not a frightened hiker, not someone waiting helplessly to be told what to do. "You've had emergency training." "Wildlife rehab," she whispered. "You learn fast when a frightened animal decides your hand is the enemy." Despite the situation, Ethan almost smiled. Beside her shoulder, a field ID badge hung from a torn lanyard. It had twisted under the blanket when he slid it in. Ethan reached carefully and turned it just enough to read the name. Dr. Lena M. Hale. His hand stopped. For 1 second, the wind seemed to vanish. Hale. The name struck him with such force that he forgot the cold biting through his gloves. Lena noticed the change. What? Ethan forced his hand to move again. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. A face rose from memory before he could stop it. Commander Warren Hale, standing beneath the brutal sun of a training range, silver beginning at his temples, eyes calm enough to make younger men stand straighter. He never raised his voice when a quiet sentence could do more damage. He never wasted praise, and when he gave Ethan the old brass compass, he had done it with the grave softness of a man handing over more than an object. A good compass doesn't tell you where to go. It reminds you when you're drifting. Ethan's fingers tightened against the blanket. Lena watched him through the haze of pain. You know that name. He did not answer quickly enough. She gave the smallest nod, as if confirming something to herself. My father was Navy. Ethan looked at her then, really looked. The green eyes, the controlled fear, the way she kept trying to help even while trapped under a broken structure. Of course there was Hale in her. What was his name? Ethan asked, though he already knew. Warren Hale. The words left her mouth quietly. They did not sound like exposition. They sounded like grief. Ethan lowered his gaze for a moment. The old guilt moved inside him, familiar and unwelcome. I served under him, he said. Lena blinked slowly. For the first time, her expression changed from pain to recognition. Mercer? Ethan's chest tightened. Yes. My dad mentioned a Mercer. The wind pressed snow against the broken platform. A radio crackled at Ethan's shoulder, but he barely heard it. Lena tried to focus. Not often. He didn't talk about that part of his life much. But sometimes, when he was holding this old photo box, she closed her eyes briefly. He'd say there were men who survived because they had a reason to come back. Ethan looked away. Rook lifted his head, sensing the shift before either human could name it. He said that about you, Lena whispered. The words hit harder than the cold. Ethan had spent years believing Warren Hale had every right to be disappointed in him, for leaving, for disappearing, for not answering the letters, for taking the compass and vanishing into a civilian life he hadn't known how to live. He shouldn't have, Ethan said. Lena's eyes sharpened as much as her condition allowed. You don't get to decide what he meant. The sentence was soft. It still landed like an order. For a moment, Ethan heard Warren in it, not the voice, the steadiness, the refusal to let a man hide behind shame and call it humility. The radio crackled again, louder this time. Mercer, we're 10 minutes out, Ben said. Snow's getting heavier. Talk to me. Ethan pressed the button. Patient is conscious, adult female, confirmed lower limb entrapment, hypothermia progressing but responsive. Can she last 10? Ethan looked at Lena. Her lips had lost more color. Her eyelids were getting heavier. Rook shifted, pushing his paw through the gap until it touched the sleeve of her jacket. Lena's fingers moved weakly toward him. Ethan knew the honest answer. 10 minutes was not a promise. It was a gamble. She has to, he said into the radio. Then he leaned close to Lena again. Stay with me. Her hand found Rook's paw. You sound like him, she murmured. Ethan swallowed. No, he said, though his voice had changed. But I'm here. Outside the tower, snow continued to fall over the lake. covering the tracks that had brought them there. Inside the broken wood and cold air, Ethan Mercer faced the name he had been running from for years. And for the first time, he could not walk away. The storm did not arrive all at once. It thickened quietly. First, the far side of the lake disappeared behind a curtain of white. Then the trees lost their edges. Then the old watchtower began to creak above Ethan's head as wind pushed snow through the broken boards and into the hollow space beneath. Lena heard it too. Her eyes shifted upward. That sound bad? Ethan tightened a knot around one of the remaining support posts. Not good, he said. Not finished. She gave a faint breath that might have been a laugh if her body had more warmth left in it. That's comforting. You're still making jokes. I'll take it. Rook remained pressed close to the gap in the platform, his front paw touching the sleeve of Lena's jacket. He had stopped whining. That worried Ethan more than the sound itself would have. The young shepherd had gone still with the kind of focus animals sometimes found when fear became too large to waste energy on. Ethan worked with careful speed. He ran one rope around a solid tree trunk outside the collapsed structure, fed it through a carabiner, then anchored a second line to the main beam, trapping Lena's leg. He was not trying to lift it yet, not fully, just reduce pressure. Just buy time. Ben's voice broke through the radio. Mercer, visibility is dropping fast. We're near the service lane, but we can't get the sled through the first drift. We're coming on foot. Copy. How's the patient? Ethan glanced at Lena. Her eyes were half open now. Responsive, but slower. Hypothermia is progressing. Ben went quiet for half a second. Do not attempt full extraction alone. I heard you the first time. I need you to hear me as your team lead, not as your conscience. Ethan paused with the rope in his hand. That landed closer than Ben probably intended. For most of his life, Ethan had been excellent at obeying orders when they made sense and dangerously good at disobeying them when they did not. In the teams, that instinct had saved people. It had also cost him pieces of himself he never learned how to name. He looked down through the gap. Lena's fingers were still touching Rook's paw, but her grip had loosened. Ethan, she whispered. I'm here. If I pass out, you're not going to. If I do, she insisted, each word slow. Don't let him think I left him. Rook lifted his head at the sound of her voice. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. This was the moment he had been avoiding since the badge, since the name Hale, since memory had stepped into the snow beside him. Not the rescue itself, the responsibility underneath it. Someone trusting him with the thing they loved most, when he had spent years believing trust was a debt he could never repay. He lowered himself closer to the opening. Lena, listen to me. Rook found help. He did his job. Now you do yours. Stay awake. Her eyes moved to his. For the first time, fear broke through her stubbornness. I can't feel my foot anymore. Ethan did not let his face change. Then we stopped talking about the foot. Tell me about him. Rook? Yes. The shepherd's ears twitched. Lena swallowed. He was brought in half-starved. Wouldn't let anyone near him. Bit through 2 leashes. Her eyelids fluttered. Not mean. Just scared. Like he thought every hand was temporary. Ethan looked at the repaired red collar. You stitched that? Badly. It's holding. So is he. Ethan glanced at Rook, who had inched closer, pushing his shoulder against the broken edge until splinters caught in his fur. The dog did not care. No, Ethan said softly. He's holding you. A sharp crack cut through the air. The damaged platform shifted. Snow slid from the roof in a heavy sheet, striking the railing and making the whole structure shudder. Rook sprang back with a bark. Lena gasped as the beam pressed harder against her trapped leg. Ethan moved before thought could slow him. He wedged the pry bar beneath the beam, set a folded section of his pack under the metal for leverage, and pulled just enough to take pressure off. Not more. Too much force could collapse the rest of the platform. "Lena, breathe." She clenched her teeth, tears slipping sideways into her hair. Ethan held the pry bar with both hands, shoulders burning. "Ben," he said into the radio, voice controlled but tight. "Structure is deteriorating. I need that support kit, now. We're 3 minutes out." Ethan looked at the sagging beam. 3 minutes could be reasonable. 3 minutes could be impossible. He adjusted his stance, boots grinding into snow and broken wood. Rook came forward again, slower this time, and lay beside Lena's shoulder, pressing his warm body against her as far as the gap allowed. Lena's breathing steadied slightly. Ethan did not move. He became the brace. The rope, the bar, the weight, the cold, the fear, all of it narrowed into one task. Hold. Not win, not fix, not outrun the past. Just hold. Through the storm, he heard Ben and the team calling his name from somewhere beyond the trees. Ethan kept his eyes on Lena. "Stay with me," he said, and with Rook trembling beside her, she did. Ben Holloway reached the clearing with 4 rescuers behind him, their red jackets cutting through the blowing snow like moving sparks. He did not waste time asking why Ethan had followed a dog into the woods. One look at the collapsed platform, the rope lines, the pry bar bent under Ethan's weight, and Lena's pale face beneath the broken boards told him enough. "Grace, thermal kit. Mason, stabilize the left frame. Nobody steps on that platform unless I say so." The team moved with practiced urgency. Grace Turner dropped beside Ethan with a medical pack, her cheeks red from the cold, her breath sharp but steady. She slid a heat pack beneath the blanket near Lena's ribs and checked her responsiveness with a voice that somehow stayed gentle under pressure. "Lena, my name is Grace. You're going to hear a lot of voices. Ethan's still right here." Lena's eyes moved weakly toward Ethan. Rook stayed pressed against her shoulder until Grace carefully looped one arm around him. "I know, buddy," she murmured. "Give us just enough room." Rook resisted for half a second, then looked at Ethan as if asking permission. Ethan nodded once. The young shepherd backed away, trembling with the effort of trust. That small choice hit Ethan harder than he expected. For Rook, stepping back was not obedience. It was faith. Ben crouched beside the beam. "We lift 2 inches, no more. Mercer, you guide the leg free. Grace, monitor her." Ethan shifted into position. The work became exact. Hands, angles, pressure, breath. On Ben's count, the rescuers lifted with the support jack and rope tension working together. The beam rose just enough for Ethan to slide his gloved hands under Lena's calf. She cried out once, a raw sound that disappeared into the wind. "I've got you," Ethan said. He eased her leg clear, inch by inch, then helped Grace secure it with a temporary splint. For 1 second, relief passed through the group. Then Rook barked, not at Lena, not at the rescuers, at the snow near the lake-facing side of the structure. It was a deep, violent bark, nothing like his earlier cries. Ethan turned. A thin, dark line was moving beneath the snow crust. At first it looked like a shadow. Then the ice beneath the platform gave a low, hollow groan. "Back from the edge," Ethan shouted. Ben saw it too. "Move! Now!" The team shifted the stretcher route away from the lakeside, just as a section of snow collapsed into a hidden melt channel beneath the old foundation. It was not dramatic. It did not explode. It simply opened, quiet and deadly, revealing black water below. Grace stared at the gap, shaken. "Another 6 feet that way." She did not finish. No one needed her to. Rook stood rigid, his uneven ears lifted, snow gathering along his back. Ben looked at the dog, then at Ethan. "That's twice today I owe him an apology." They carried Lena out through the trees on a sled stretcher, slow and careful, following the safer route back to the service lane. Ethan walked beside her the whole way, one hand near the rail, the other holding Rook's repaired red collar so the dog would not rush under the rescuer's boots. By the time they reached the ambulance, Lena was barely conscious. A man in a Navy paramedic jacket climbed out and took over with calm precision. He was in his late 30s, dark-haired, wearing thin glasses that kept fogging at the edges. "Dr. Aaron Bishop," he said without looking up from Lena's vitals. "Hypothermia protocol. Let's move." Only then did Ethan realize how cold his own hands were. At the hospital, the waiting stretched longer than the rescue. Ethan sat in the corridor with Rook curled beneath his chair, the shepherd's head resting on his boot. Snow melted from Ethan's jacket onto the floor. No one asked him to leave. Near midnight, a woman stepped into the hall. She had silver hair cut to her shoulders, a camel-colored coat buttoned neatly despite the hour, and the same green eyes Ethan had seen beneath the broken tower. "Ethan Mercer?" He stood at once. "Ma'am." "I'm Evelyn Hale." The name carried no accusation. That made it harder. "How is she?" "Stable," Evelyn said, though her hand tightened around the strap of an old film camera hanging from her shoulder. "Dr. Bishop says the next day matters, but she's alive." Rook rose slowly and approached her. Evelyn knelt with a soft sound that was almost a sob. "Oh, Rook." The dog pressed his forehead into her coat. For a while, she simply held him. Then she looked up at Ethan. "Warren used to say you were the kind of man who came back for people." Ethan felt the hallway narrow around him. "I didn't come back to him." Evelyn's expression softened, not with pity, but with recognition. "No," she said. "You came back to his daughter." Ethan could not answer. Evelyn stood, reached into her coat pocket, and handed him a small, folded photograph. It showed Commander Warren Hale, years earlier, standing beside a younger Ethan and 3 other men beneath a desert sun. On the back, written in Warren's steady handwriting, were 6 words. "Mercer will find his way home." Ethan stared at the photograph until the letters blurred. For years, he had thought silence was proof that he had lost his place in the world. But in that hospital corridor, with Rook leaning against his leg and Lena alive behind the doors, Ethan understood something he was not ready to say aloud. Maybe he had not been lost forever. Maybe he had only needed someone small, stubborn, and brave enough to lead him back. Lena did not recover all at once. She recovered in small, stubborn victories. The first time she stood with crutches, Rook barked so loudly that Dr. Bishop opened the door to make sure no one had fallen. The first time she made it down the hospital corridor, Ethan walked 3 steps behind her, close enough to help, but far enough to let her own the distance. The first time she laughed without pain cutting it short, Evelyn turned her face toward the window and wiped her eyes before anyone could see. Winter stayed outside for weeks, pressing white palms against the glass. Inside, life returned slowly. Ethan visited more often than he admitted he would. At first, he told himself it was for Rook. The young shepherd had attached himself to Ethan after the rescue with a loyalty that was both flattering and inconvenient. Whenever Ethan entered Lena's room, Rook would rise from beside her bed, trot straight to him, and press his head against Ethan's knee as if reporting for duty. Lena noticed.
Of course she did. "He's not subtle," she said one afternoon, watching Rook lean his full weight against Ethan's leg. "He's young. That's generous. He's committed. That's worse." Ethan almost smiled. Almost had become easier around her. Lena was still pale, still moving carefully, but the sharpness in her eyes had returned. Her hair was usually tied low, loose strands falling around her face. The lighthouse pendant at her throat caught the weak winter sun whenever she shifted. She did not treat Ethan like a hero. That helped more than gratitude ever could have. She asked him normal questions. What he ate for breakfast. Whether Ben still pretended not to worry. Whether the lake made sounds at night when the ice moved. And sometimes, without warning, she asked hard ones. "Did you ever write back to my father?" Ethan looked at the floor. "No." "Do you wish you had?" "Every day now." She nodded, not pushing. That was Lena's gift. She could hold silence without turning it into punishment.
By March, the hospital released her to continue therapy at home. Evelyn's small house sat near the edge of town, blue-gray against the snow, with a porch full of wind chimes that sounded like glass in the cold. Ethan began stopping by twice a week to help with Rook's training. That was the official reason. The unofficial reason became harder to ignore. He liked the way Lena spoke to injured animals, as if dignity mattered even when they could not understand every word. He liked that she argued with him about safety protocols, and usually had a point. He liked the quiet after training, when Rook slept on the rug, and Lena made tea she always forgot to drink while it was hot. One evening, Ethan brought the old brass compass with him. He had not planned to show her, but plans had a way of changing around Lena. They were sitting on the back porch, wrapped in coats, watching snow melt from the pine branches in slow drops.
Rook was chasing a stick he had no intention of returning. "My father gave you that?" Lena asked. Ethan turned the compass over in his palm. "After I got lost during a navigation drill." "You got lost?" "I was 26 and arrogant enough to call it strategic rerouting." Lena laughed softly. The sound warmed something in him that winter had not touched. "He told me a good compass doesn't tell you where to go," Ethan said. "It reminds you when you're drifting." Lena looked at the lake. "Sounds like him." "I thought carrying it meant I remembered him." Ethan closed his fingers around the brass. "But maybe I was using it to avoid going anywhere." Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Maybe Rook found you because you were both trying to get back to someone." The words settled between them without demand. Ethan looked at her then, really looked, and realized the feeling that had been growing inside him was not gratitude, not obligation, not the leftover shock of survival. It was gentler, more dangerous. Hope. Spring came late to Moosehead, but when it came, it changed everything. The lake loosened at the edges. Snowbanks shrank into dirty white islands along the road. The rescue station opened its first community winter safety workshop of the season, even though winter was technically ending. Ben called it preparation. Grace called it public guilt prevention. Lena called it common sense. Rook wore his repaired red collar and a new training harness. He was not perfect. He pulled too early, got distracted by sandwich wrappers, and once tried to greet a mannequin used for rescue practice. But when Lena gave the command and Ethan released the line, Rook lowered his nose, focused,
and found the hidden volunteer behind the storage shed in less than a minute. The small crowd applauded. Rook stood tall, uneven ears lifted, as if he had known all along that he was meant for this.
Afterward, as people packed up gear and the afternoon light turned gold, Lena walked beside Ethan toward the lake path. She no longer needed crutches, though she still moved with care.
"You know," she said, "I owe you dinner."
"You don't."
"I didn't say as thanks."
Ethan stopped. Rook ran ahead, then paused and looked back at them, tail moving through the last patches of snow. Lena's cheeks had color in them now, not from fever or cold, but from something alive and uncertain.
"I mean dinner," she said, "because I want to."
Ethan looked at the melting lake, then at the woman who had survived winter with more grace than anyone had a right to. For once, he did not reach for the compass. He already knew which way he wanted to go. "I'd like that," he said. Rook barked once, bright and proud, as if the decision had been obvious from the beginning. And as the three of them walked on, with spring breaking open around Moosehead, Ethan understood that some rescues did not end when the ambulance doors closed. Some rescues took months. Some looked like training sessions, quiet porches, unfinished cups of tea, and a young dog who refused to let two wounded people remain strangers. Sometimes healing does not arrive as a loud miracle. Sometimes it comes quietly, through a loyal dog, a second chance, an unanswered letter, or someone who chooses to listen when everyone else walks past. Ethan, Lena, and Rook remind us that no life is too broken to be guided home again. Grace can find us in the coldest seasons, and even the smallest act of loyalty can open the door to hope. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us who in your life has helped you find your way back. And if you want more stories of courage, faith, and unexpected healing, please subscribe to the channel. May peace find you where you are, and may you never miss the small miracles God places along your path.